Om Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Maheti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. We begin today with verse number 234. Yadi satyam bhavet vishvam sushuptau palabhyatam yannopalabhyate kinchit atos asat swapnavan vrishap. If the universe were real, it would be perceived even in deep sleep. Since nothing is perceived then, the universe is unreal, being only an appearance like a dream. So this was, as we have seen on earlier occasions, one of the equations, if you like, that is made in Vedanta. That how do you define reality? When can we say something is real? And usually, the immediate answer that comes to mind is that, well, if I see something, then it's real. That's why sometimes people say seeing is believing. If I see it, if I can touch it, if I can hear it, then it must be real. But that is not how reality is defined in the text here. The reason that is not how reality is seen is that all of the things that we can do in the waking state, all of the experiences we have in the waking state, like seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, all of those things occur in dream as well. In dream also we see things, in dream also we hear sound, and yet it's not real. And therefore, merely hearing or seeing itself is no guarantee that the object is real. And therefore, the definition of reality given in this text is, if something is real, it is eternal. The word for real in Sanskrit is satyam or sat. And eternal means nityam. So satyam equals nityam. What it means is that there is no such thing as a temporary reality. Sometimes when a magician can say, look at my hands are empty, and I do some abracadabra, some magic, and say, look, now there is a rose in my hand. And then everyone sees the rose there. And then again I move my hand and then I say, oh, the rose has vanished. So was that rose real? And the answer is that if it has lasted only for a moment, then it was not real. I just imagined it. Not that I was not seeing it. Yes, I saw it. But if it were truly there, then it wouldn't vanish. Which is what happens in the dream. I don't see anyone in their senses discussing after waking up in the morning, oh, what happened to the dream world that I saw yesterday in my dream? we effortlessly, we just say, oh, that was just a dream. Although when I was seeing it, it was very real. So the only reason I dismiss dreams as unreal because they just vanish. Now, compared to the dreams, this world that we experience, relative to the dreams, appears more real. And the reason it appears real is that it has some sense of persistence, some sense of continuity. I just feel that yes, I may go to sleep, but the world that I see next morning doesn't seem to be any different from the world that I saw last night. And therefore, this world seems to be more real than the dream. Now, if we kind of look back at this world also, we might notice that all the arguments we give to prove that the dream is not real applies to this waking world also. Because if the dream is not real because the dream vanishes in the morning, this world is not real either because it vanishes when I go to sleep. And therefore, the idea of continuity that we have when we wake up in the morning itself may be an illusion. By that I mean, yes, now we can say from a present vantage point that every night I have a new dream, a different dream. I don't see the same dream every night. Okay. But when I'm seeing the dream, do I know that today it's a new dream? It's different from yesterday. I don't feel that way. When I'm seeing the dream, that dream world appears to have the same continuity that the world I see when I wake up in the morning. And therefore, even the idea that every day I wake up and see the same world itself may be an illusion. We cannot prove it or disprove it either way, but none of us can say exactly for sure that this is the same world I saw yesterday. We don't know. So essentially, there are two schools of thought here. One is called the Drishti Srishti Vada in Sanskrit, and the other is called Srishti Drishti Vada. Now these are all Sanskrit terms, you don't have to memorize this. Simply this. The question is simple. Do I see the world because it is there, or the world is there because I see it? They are two different things, very different things. And material sciences say that I see this object here because it is there. If this object were not there, I wouldn't see it. So my perception depends on the object. And the other way of thinking is that, no, the perception doesn't depend on the object. The object depends on my perception of it. And so what this means is really this, that when does my dream world start? When does my dream begin? And I can only say that my dream begins the moment I become conscious of it. When do I wake up? What does waking up mean? Waking up means I'm asleep, I wake up and I see this world. When does this world begin? It begins when I become conscious of it. But it comes along with the idea that this world is the same world that I saw yesterday. So this is a very radical idea, really. And what it means is this, that every time I see something, I sense something, I'm creating it. And when I don't see it, don't sense it, the creation ends. So, in other words, just like every night I'm seeing a new dream, but don't know that it is a new dream, every morning I may be seeing a different world, but don't know that it's a different world. Which really means the distinction I make between waking and dream itself is meaningless. If I see one kind of dream while asleep, I see another kind of dream when I wake up. So this is one dream. The dream I see in my sleep is a different dream. The deep sleep is another dream. In that dream, I don't see anything, I just experience happiness. But it's still a dream. We can extend this to say, even if we believe in something called heaven or hell, that is another dream. Going to heaven may be another dream, maybe a very pleasant dream. Going to hell might be a nightmarish dream, but a dream nonetheless. If some people believe in the idea of rebirth, that is another dream. In other words, it's possible to look upon our entire existence as just going from one dream to another dream. Just like every night. We just don't see one dream per night. Most people see more than one dream at night. If at all we remember our dreams, the dream that we remember is usually the last dream before waking up. That's the dream we mostly remember. So our entire existence can be seen from just one dream ending, another dream starting. Dream after dream after dream. Now, what is necessary for a dream experience to come? I must be asleep. Because unless I'm asleep, I can't dream. Now, what does sleep mean? Sleep means I forget who I am. And waking up means I know who I am. Now, what this text is trying to say is that right now we don't know who we are. In our dreams, we see ourselves as human beings. And as long as we continue seeing ourselves as human beings, or as long as we continue seeing ourselves as anything other than infinite, pure, perfect beings, we are still dreaming. So the verses that we are reading at the moment show the reality of what we would experience when we wake up, when we truly know who we are. And if this is not how we see ourselves right now, that is because we are dreaming. That is because we are asleep. So that is the idea here. If the universe were real, it would be perceived even in deep sleep. Since nothing is perceived here, the universe is unreal, being only an appearance like a dream. Verse 235. Atah prithang nasti jagat paratmanah prithak pratitistu mrusha guna hivat aropitasyasti kimarthavatta adhishthanam abhati tatha bhramena. Therefore, the universe is not different from the Supreme Self. Its distinct identity is only an appearance like that of a snake seen instead of a rope. Has the superimposed any meaningful existence? It is merely the mistaken perception of the substratum. If you go back to the example of the rope and the snake, we can ask the same question. Is the snake different from the rope? And the answer is no. I'm just mistaking one thing for another. So we can reread this verse by just substituting rope and snake there. Therefore, the snake is not different from the rope. Its distinct identity is only an appearance. So is the superimposed snake any meaningful existence? Can that snake which is superimposed do anything at all? Well, it can frighten you, but that's because of my ignorance. But that snake cannot bite me. That snake cannot inject any poison into me because it's only really a rope. And therefore, just as the snake is not different from the rope, this world that I see is not different from Brahman or the infinite reality. What it also means is this, that sometimes we create duality by thinking, oh, this is the world, all of this is the world, and now I'm looking for God, I'm looking in search for God. As if God or that ultimate reality is something somewhere far away, but not this. And what we are being told is that ultimate reality alone exists. I cannot see anything other than that reality. I cannot touch anything other than that reality. I cannot smell anything other than that reality. And so even now, even at this very moment, we are all experiencing that highest truth. But I'm not able to see the truth as it is. I'm seeing that truth as this world. So what has covered that truth are all these names and forms. And if these names and forms can somehow be made to vanish, then I will see that I'm standing in the presence of the highest truth. I'm standing in the presence of God. That's the idea. Verse 236. Bhrantasya yadyat bhramatav pratitam brahmaiva tattat rajatam hi shuktihi idam taya brahma sadeva rupyate tvaropitam brahmani nama matram. Everything that the deluded perceives through mistake is nothing but Brahman, just as the silver is nothing but mother of pearl. Whatever is perceived as this is only a name. It is only Brahman that is real. So here we have a different example of the mother of pearl. It's really sometimes the scientific name for it is called the nacre. It's the mollusk shell, as you find in pearl oysters. Sometimes when you're walking on the sea beach or something, and there is bright sun above, and suddenly you see a shining object, looks very silverish, and you might think it's a piece of silver or some coin or something, and then you go and find it just a shell. So we keep on saying rope and snake all the time, so it's good to have a little different example, because superimpositions can occur in hundreds and millions of different ways. And so here the different example is, just as the silver color, the silver appearance is superimposed on that shell, in the same way that the snake is superimposed on a rope. So everything that is perceived by us is perceived through a mistake, just like a snake is perceived or the silver is perceived. and we have seen this in an earlier set of verses when they spoke about objects made of clay. For instance, we have a clay jar or a clay pot or a clay glass. Now, all these names are just based on a certain form that that material has. But essentially, everything is really clay. In the same way, the material, or what seems like a material, is essentially the same in this world, because there is only one, that is that chit, that consciousness. But if names and forms get superimposed on that consciousness, then that consciousness seems to have a certain form. It's just like water in the ocean. Now, water has no form. It was the infinite ocean, relatively speaking. But then you see ripples and you see waves. Now, what is a wave? A wave is nothing but the same water which has taken a certain form and moving in a certain way. And then I say, oh, there is a wave. But if you kind of say, oh, let me pick up the wave in my hand, and then you just see just water. So, what distinguishes a wave from the rest of the ocean? It just is name and form. But it doesn't have any separate identity of its own because the material is exactly the same. In the same way, everything in this universe is just filled with that ultimate reality, with truth, with consciousness. But what makes one object different from another is just its appearance and the different name that we give to it. So whatever is perceived as this is only a name. Idam taya. Now, every object also has a specific name, and if you have several languages, in different languages it will be called by different names. But every object also has one generic name. And I can just say, if it is near to me, say, this. Say, there is a story sometimes they used to say that in one lab, they had this one assistant in the lab who was expected to explain to the students how to do a particular experiment. But he didn't know much English. And he was expected to explain it in English. And so because he didn't know, his vocabulary was very poor, so he would simply say, take this, do this. And he actually would do the experiment. He was able to explain everything, mainly using the word this. Take this, do this, put this. So the idea is, this is a kind of a master key, if you like. If you don't know something, you just say this. And it usually works, not all the time, usually. And so sometimes it is said that a common name for any object, if it is close to you, you say this. If it is far away, you say that. And so that is what is referred to here. But all this or that, or any specific name that an object might have, that is just only a name. It doesn't change the reality which constitutes that object. Verses 237 and 238. Atah param brahma sadadvitiyam vishuddha vijnana ghanam niranjanam prashantamadhyanta vihinam akriyam nirantarananda rasasvarupam nirastamaya krita sarva bhedam nityam dhruvam nishkalam aprameyam arupam avyaktam anakhyam avyayam jyotisvayam kinchididam chakasti. Now all of the ideas that we have spoken of up to this point are summarized in these concluding verses. Whatever whatever appears as this is the Supreme Brahman, idam, this, who is real, means eternal. I explained what the meaning of real is in Vedanta. Non-dual means there is no second thing apart from it. Embodiment of pure consciousness, that alone is the supreme reality. So, and consciousness is the only non-material entity. If something is material, it has to follow the laws of matter. But if something is non-material, then it doesn't have to follow the laws of matter. And according to the way Vedanta sees it, pure consciousness is the only non-material entity. Anything other than consciousness is material. And therefore you see, the way the word consciousness is seen in Vedanta is very different from sometimes how it is thought of in some science circles. Because oftentimes consciousness is seen by some people as a byproduct of the brain activity. That there is certain neurological activity occurring here, and consciousness is one of the byproducts of that. Whatever they mean by that, that consciousness is material. If it is a product of a material activity of material entities, which is the brain, no matter how subtle or delicate or rarefied brain matter may be, it still is material. And so consciousness seen as a product of material activity would be material also, would be still within laws and would be mortal and would die. But consciousness is seen here in Vedanta as a non-material entity, hence is beyond all material laws. And that is what is meant by saying pure consciousness. Why it's pure? Why not simply consciousness? The reason the word pure oftentimes gets used, because the way we use the word consciousness seems to imply the presence of an object. Like I'm conscious of this, I'm conscious of a chair, I'm conscious of a table. So it might seem as if consciousness will need an object for its existence. But consciousness doesn't need an object. The object needs consciousness for me to perceive it. But consciousness doesn't need an object. It's a little bit like light. Light is material, but just as an example, I need light to see an object. But the light can exist even if that object doesn't exist. In fact, we cannot see light. We can only see the objects illumined by light, by our human eyes. And therefore, just as light is independent of the objects it illumines, consciousness is independent of the objects that it illumines for us, the objects that we become conscious of as a result of this consciousness. So pure consciousness means consciousness itself, consciousness without any object. Without blemish, niranjanam. Blemish here would mean, normally when we say pure gold or pure milk, what it means is it's not mixed with anything else. It's just that, 100%. Yeah. So pure, without blemish means this consciousness, nothing is mixed in this consciousness. It's just 100% consciousness. Serene, prashantam, there is no disturbance in it. Birthless and deathless, because birth and death, birth in the way we understand really means coming together of different material objects. Even in the birth of a living being, it really cells coming together. And death really means this being who is there, who is a combination of several material particles, and those material particles come apart. And that's why after death, the body is reduced to a heap of dust or ashes. So material particles coming together becomes composition. And that's essentially the birth of an object or a living or a non-living being. Death would be the opposite of composition. It becomes decomposition. That's how compose and decompose. But that occurs only in the material world. It's beyond activity, because activity needs space, activity needs purpose, activity needs a motive. None of those are needed, none of those are present in Brahman. Embodiment of absolute bliss, because it is infinite, free from all distinctions created by Maya. Maya is something that doesn't exist. Eternal, unchanging, indivisible, unknowable as an object, because it is the eternal subject. Formless, undifferentiated, nameless, immutable, and self-luminous. By self-luminous is meant, I need consciousness to be conscious of objects, but I don't need any other consciousness to become conscious of this first consciousness. So this consciousness can illumine itself as well as things other. Just like light. If I have a source of light, then with that light I can see everything. But in order to see this light, I don't need to bring another light to see it. Exactly the same way. Verse 239. Jnatridneya jnana shunyam anantam nirvikalpakam kevala khandachin matram param tattvam vidurbudhaha. The enlightened realize the supreme truth to be beyond the triad of the knower, the known, and the knowledge, infinite, without any differentiation, and of the essence of indivisible consciousness. Everything, every activity needs this triad. There is the subject, the object, and the action connecting the subject with the object. So if I am reading a book, I am the subject, the book is the object, and the reading is the activity that connects me with that book. Similarly, knowing, there is a knower, there is an object of to be known, and is the activity of knowing that connects the two. So everything in this world has these three things. All perceptions occur through these triad. Verse 240. Aheyam anupadeyam manovacham agocharam aprameyam anadyanantam brahmapurnam mahanmaha. Brahman, being one's own self, can neither be cast away nor received. Just like anything other than me, some object, I can take or I can leave. But I cannot take myself or leave myself because I'm myself. It's like no matter how strong you are, and you may be able to lift heavy objects, but no one can lift themselves. You cannot lift yourself because the subject and the object, if it's the same, then there is no activity possible, no action possible. Beyond the reach of the mind and speech, we have seen this before, unknowable as an object, without beginning or end because it is infinite, whole, it cannot be divided, the light which illumines everything. So with this verse 240, we come to the end of this section on Brahman. So what we have seen up to this point are two major things. First is a good section of the early part of the book dealt with aham, I. Who am I? As I am experiencing now. And in that context, we become aware of the body, the mind, the ego, the intellect, and so on. All the different layers over my personality, as I experience myself at present. Then the next section, which dealt with the Atman and Brahman, dealt with that reality, which is pure consciousness, infinite, all of the adjectives that we saw applied now. So these are the two things we have seen up to this point. We have come almost halfway through this book, so almost about 50% of the book. We have seen who I am now and what that ultimate reality is. And the next section of the book will go to this very important point about how I am connected with that ultimate reality. What is the relationship? That will be discussed in the section going forward. Me and that infinite reality. And it's no mystery. You know that this is a book of non-dualistic approach to life. So essentially the conclusion that they will try to describe and explain is that right now, as I see myself, this small little human being, born, will die, going through illness, going through the process of aging, with lot of stress, anxiety, worry, a mortal creature, like hundreds of billions of other creatures in the world. And whatever idea we might have about that supreme being, this infinite, eternal being, filled with all the wonderful qualities, we look very different right now. And the non-dualistic approach to that is saying, if you look deeply in yourself, and if you look deeply into that reality, you will notice that they are not different, that they are one and the same. So that will be discussed and explained in the sections that follow, which we will take up next week. So if you have any thoughts, ideas, questions, you can ask me now. Yeah.
Pranam Swamiji. So Swamiji, referring to the point that you made today regarding how dream is falsely perceived as a reality because of the quality that it has, which is persistent continuity, and and what I want to know is if that is considered to be a fact. We have heard so many stories of great men having glimpses of the pure consciousness, which means that the perception of this false reality is broken. So how come once the persistent reality is broken, that they are again able to fall back into this falsely perceived reality and not continue to have an experience of pure consciousness?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things we have to remember is what other person is seeing, only that person knows. I know only what I am seeing. And what someone else is seeing, I can only guess, I can only imagine, it's an inference. So you're already making an assumption that people who have experienced that highest reality, then they are coming back into this reality again. The accurate way would be to say that I'm seeing some people, or I'm guessing that there are some people who have attained to that reality, and it looks as if they have come back again into this world of names and form. But it's not their problem, it's my problem, right? Because, okay, let me kind of back up a little bit. We are starting with a false assumption. We're starting with the assumption that there are really many people, out of which a few people have attained, and then I see them come down again. But that assumption itself is being questioned here. are there really many people? Because Brahman alone exists. And so there are really not many people at all. There is only one being. And every one of us can say, I am that being. So it's not me as in me. Everyone can point at themselves and say, that's the non-dualistic approach. Everyone should point at their heart and say, I'm the only being that exists. But I'm deluded. I'm dreaming. It's like this. When we go to sleep, we never go to sleep collectively. Even if there are 10 people living in a home and they go to sleep, everyone goes in their own sleep. Everyone has their own dreams. And therefore, the idea of a collective thing is itself an illusion. Because let's say I may be the only person on an island and I go to sleep. And in my dream, I see many people, I see birds, I see creatures, but none of them is real. I'm the only one who is real. And Brahman alone is real. So Brahman has fallen asleep. The infinite being has fallen asleep and started dreaming. And in Brahman's dream, Brahman is seeing these millions of people. And then, among these millions of people, Brahman looks at one person and says, this is me. And that is the me that we all feel in our heart all the time. So this me that we have, the idea that I am someone, that is the experience of Brahman who is asleep. So in my dream, I'm seeing that some people see that some people in my dream have become enlightened. And then they seem to come back again. But it really is my dream, it's not their dream. You see? Now we might say, well, if they are all just dreams, then do I learn anything from them? So if I see that they're illumined people, or even scriptures for that matter, these are all dream. Vivekachudamani, the book you're holding in your hand, it's a dream. And we say, well, can it help me? Of course it can help me. Because if in my sleep, if I'm thirsty, it's not real thirst, it's only a dream thirst. But still, as long as I'm dreaming, that thirst appears very real. Now, how will my dream thirst be quenched? Well, get water. But that water is not real either. It's just a dream water. But the dream water is very helpful, very effective in quenching my dream thirst. A dream food is very effective in quenching my dream hunger. Now my ignorance that I have is also in a dream. So the dream knowledge that I get from these illumined people in my dream, the dream knowledge that I get by these dream scriptures, that can remove my ignorance. It's very effective. So just because I'm the only reality, and just because everyone and everything I see is an object of my dream, doesn't mean that they can't be helpful to me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Hariom Swamiji. Swamiji, we use light as an example to explain consciousness. And it doesn't need another to be seen, but it needs the eyes to be perceived. So what are the faculties through which we experience consciousness?
Okay, good. Thank you. So whenever an example is given, the example is given to point out only a certain to convey a certain idea. It can't be taken too literally. As Sri Ramakrishna sometimes said, if someone says, "Oh, you fought like a tiger." No, fought like a tiger is an example that's given. Doesn't mean that while you're fighting you grew a tail or anything, or spots like a tiger or anything. So here the example of light is given because really to explain how or what Brahman or pure consciousness is, really no example can be given. Because that's the only reality. Which other example can be given? Any example is going to be not anything like Brahman, because Brahman is unique. There is a beautiful song that the great saint Tulsidas wrote about Rama. While he's composing that song, he wanted to describe the beauty of Rama, how beautiful Ram's appearance is. And so he started writing and says, Ram is like, and he's thinking, what metaphor can I use? How can I describe the beauty of Rama? And no matter what example he gave, it just seemed like, no, Rama is more beautiful than that. I can't compare. Normally people say you're like the moon, and nowadays after going to the moon and seeing what it is, in old poetry it was like a moon-like face, and I was like, now it would be an insult if you say like a moon-like face. So then Tulsidas was trying to describe Rama, and he then ends up by saying in that song, Rama is like Rama. That's all. What can you do? So now, how do you explain pure consciousness? So I gave the example of a light. Just as a light doesn't need another light to illumine itself, consciousness doesn't need another consciousness to illumine itself. There the similarity ends, because light is still a material object and consciousness is the only non-material thing. And so, when you think about eyes, here you can't use the example of eyes here because consciousness is all that exists. We might say, well, how do I then even become aware of consciousness? Because I don't have a separate mind. So consciousness becomes aware of itself. So if you want to use, if you were to imagine light to be a living being, if light were living, let's say the sun, think about the sun, keep your science aside for a moment, and think that the sun is a person, and the person's nature is light. So now just as the sun wouldn't need another person to come and, or another pair of eyes to see itself, it's in that way. So just an example, not a perfect example. No example is perfect really. Yeah.
Swamiji, it seems like we are in dream la la land when we are wake up or we are sleeping. So if serious spiritual seeker, if in the dream can a serious spiritual seeker can get enlightenment in the dream, or that is just a dream?
No, absolutely. We can get enlightenment and then we are free. In fact, that was a good question. That was one of the questions I had asked years ago to my teacher, that, well, if I attain enlightenment, then it will be still enlightened in my dream. It won't be like a real enlightenment because everything is a dream. And then he said, no, if you attain enlightenment, that means essentially getting enlightenment really means waking up. That means the dream ending. Yeah. Yes.
Swamiji, so this, in Western thought, there's the theory of idealism, where the idea is that you can't prove the existence of the objective world. It's only this objective world that's real, so you can't prove that what we're seeing is existing, only their thoughts are existing. Is that what we're saying here? Is that what this book is telling us?
No, I think it goes beyond pure idealism. Because the idealism, as I best understand it, I'm not an expert in that, but I think it still deals with the mind. It's very subjective. What I think idealism pushed back to its logical conclusion would be Vedanta. But I think in Western idealism, it just ends with the mind and kind of things like that. You can't go beyond it. And really what we are talking about is going beyond that mind. So the real subject is not the mind, but the real subject is beyond the mind. Because the mind itself is also a layer. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, so we will stop here today. So next week when we meet, we'll begin with this third big section here called You Are That. So once the idea is, right now I feel I'm this little mortal human creature. But once I learn to look deeply into my heart and look deeply behind the reality behind this universe, then I see that the reality here and the reality behind this world is one and the same. And when I see it's one and the same, that is the time I get this realization that I am the infinite one. I am the perfect one. And that is what that Sanskrit Mahavakya means. Aham Brahmasmi. That I am Brahman. And so what the section will do going forward is to help us understand how these two entities, which superficially look so different, are really one and the same. Through applying reason, through applying logic, it will show us. And then it will also show what would be the changes that occur in me when I get this realization, when I get this experience. And as I said, it has to be kept in mind. It's not simply an intellectual formulation, not something that, purely through logic I have achieved it. Because sometimes when you may follow all the logic, you may follow all the rational arguments here, and it may make sense, and it can be intellectually very stimulating, which is great. But that itself is no guarantee that you have become enlightened. Because everything is still very cerebral. From that, it has to descend down into our heart. But descending into the heart, I mean, it must become an actual experience in our day-to-day life. That not only will I start seeing myself differently, but if I see myself differently, every person I meet, every object I see will become divine. And so what we are looking for is an actual direct experience of the heart. And a way to do that in the beginning is with getting a clearer idea, as much as it is humanly possible, to understand and to even to appreciate this idea intellectually. There has to be a certain amount of clarity in the mind, a certain amount of refinement of the intellect. And that refinement, that clarity will help me to look deeply into the truth. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Next Sunday, our subject will be God's work. And on Saturday, we'll have meditation as usual. We'll conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you.